My name is Eisha, and I'm an alcoholic. This is a story about a night that changed my life. It was an early evening in late March, about 10, maybe 15 years ago. I was on stage and a phone started ringing. And the person felt very ashamed and they put it off. I had just started thinking about becoming a professional actor, and a friend of mine had recommended that I go and speak to a colleague of his. This was someone who had been active in the Delhi theatre scene for many, many years, and he thought that it was a good way for me to get a foot in the door or break a leg on stage. But when I got there, I saw that this wasn't just any friend or colleague. This was Sukhi. It was Sukhi the alcoholic. Now Sukhi was one of Delhi's most first and famous alcoholics, because he was the first in his circle to kind of start talking about it. And I had grown up listening to stories about him. And when I got there and I sat down, the first thing that he asked me was, "So why do you want to act? Why do you want to get on stage?" And I told him that it's because I love feeling things. You know, as human beings, this is the one capability we have, that we can feel things. We can go so high and so low, and I just want to feel everything that a human being can feel. And real life just doesn't give the same opportunities that stories do, does it? He agreed. It was supposed to be an awkward conversation, but somehow it wasn't. You know, I was surprised to find that he was actually a really good listener, for an actor especially. You know, he was kind with his words, he was generous with his time, and as I found out, he was also now completely clean, absolutely sober. Not one sip of alcohol in about 18 years. So exactly around the time that most people are celebrating their first drink, Sukhi was just actually celebrating his last. Just that he didn't have class. I told him, "Oh, that's great. So that means you're clean now, so you're no longer an alcoholic." And he said to me, smiled, and just said, "Well, I'll always be an alcoholic, my dear. I just don't drink anymore." It's kind of... It's like any other disease, like diabetes. You don't stop being diabetic, do you? You just stop eating sugar. Now, we all know that there's no greater moment in a conversation when someone whips out a really good analogy. So I raised my glass of water in solemn agreement, but just as we were about to do a cheers, I stopped. Because I got a little confused. Because when I looked in his eyes, I was certain that I saw something that resembled almost a flash of pride. Or maybe it was just a certain irreverence. But something told me that this man is more proud of being an alcoholic than he is of being sober. Sukhi and we became fast friends, even though he was about 30 years older than me. He even named me Krishnamurti, after the great Indian philosopher, because he found it endearing, cute even, because he thought it was so strange that I was so serious, given that I was so young. And he said, "Oh, youth is just so wasted on you young people, yeah, Krishnamurti." Time went by and we got deeper into our conversation. And soon I saw that he was checking his watch because it was time to leave. And he said, "I have a really important meeting to get to, but you know what, Krishnamurti? I think you should come with me. Because, honestly, I think you need to. Been listening to you for a couple of hours and you need this. Besides, it's an open meeting. Everybody's invited." And that is how I got to my first Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. It was an open meeting under an open sky. We were sitting in a church in Defense Colony on the terrace. There were 10 peeling cane chairs, one overexposed light bulb, lots of flies running around. I remember feeling hot and not in a good way. So I sit down, there are 4 people there besides us, and next to me on the chair is this very petite young girl. She was really tiny. And the first thing I noticed about her was that even though she was wearing these really simple running clothes, she was covered head to toe in diamonds. Just diamonds everywhere. Everywhere that you can imagine, she had on diamonds. Next to her, there was this man with a briefcase, and it was stuffed with lots of papers, and these stamped papers, which told me that he probably had a very boring job. I told myself it was probably taxes. After that, there was this very handsome man with a middle parting, which was actually a very trendy hairstyle for that time. should give you a little idea about how long ago the story actually was. And last but not the least, this lady with a very kind face and a bright red pen. And she was checking off these exam papers. And I think she was a junior school math teacher because they were really simple sums, addition, multiplication, 7 times 8 is, what is it? I always forget that one. 56. And I saw her at that moment, she just did a little tick mark and wrote, "We good." It was a very motley crew, I looked at all these people and I thought, none of these people would have ever been friends in actual life. I don't even think they would have met in any kind of situation. But I thought back to what Sukhi said to me in the car. He said, there is room in the AA for people of all shades of belief and non-belief. This was not a members-only club. In fact, the only requirement to be here was an honest desire to stop drinking. And so he started. My name is Sukhpal, and I'm an alcoholic. Now, we all know from countless films and TV shows that most AA meetings start this way. And I always found it strange that a club that has the word anonymous in its title starts with you putting out your name, your identity, and then confessing your most frightening secret, that you're an addict. But the meeting went around, the introduction started, and as the circle went closer and closer and came to me, I was getting more and more nervous. My palms were sweating, my heart was racing. I looked like a teenage girl who had just spotted her first crush because, and here's a really important part of the story, I am not actually an alcoholic. But there are these moments in life where we're faced with 2 questions. The why and the why not. And most of us spend a lot of time in the why and the how and just sort of figuring out that conversation. But the why not, even though that's a much shorter conversation, is usually where the magic happens. So when Sukhi, he suggested to me that I go to this meeting and introduce myself as an alcoholic, and I asked him why, he said, well, Krishnamurti, then you'll get to experience this meeting in a way that you never will otherwise. Besides, you're the one who said that you like feeling things, right? And as the circle came closer to me, I took a deep breath and I said, my name is Eisha, and I'm an alcoholic. And they all looked back at me with complete trust and absolute love and said, hi Eisha, welcome to the AA. Now it's pretty typical in the AA when a new member joins that the old members start by telling their origin story. The moment that they first realize that they were in fact addicts, because this helps the new person come to terms and accept, their actual situation, and as we all know, acceptance is the first step towards change. And so they started. Briefcase was just drinking because he had to keep up with his colleagues at his job. He had never actually had a drop of alcohol in his life, so he didn't know that he was an alcoholic, but soon it got the better of him. He lost his job, lost his wife, lost his family, went into rehab, came out, got a new job, a new wife, a new life, only until a Diwali party where a waiter assumed that when he asked for a Coke, he meant that he wanted rum in it, and here he was right back where he started. Lady with the red pen, drunk, drove her car straight into a standing lamppost and watched it coming, falling down, missing her by just minutes. And she said that's when she first realized that it was time to stop drinking and start living. Middle parting was sitting here because he had recently lost his father, who couldn't come to terms with his son's condition. And he realized that before his mother gets into the same space, he better get into recovery. But we never heard the end of his story because he was crying so much because he was so overwhelmed with grief and guilt. Diamonds, the most sparkling character of the night, was an early riser. And she explained because she had started to wake up really early at 4 a.m. because she had to get up before her husband did to make sure that she could drive to the first Tekka in Faridabad that opened so she could start her day with alcohol. And when her husband found bottles hidden in the oven, he took away her car keys. And at that point, she somehow managed to give herself a black eye and hurt herself so she could convince her parents that he was beating her up regularly so she could come back home and raid their bar instead. That's when I first noticed that the only diamond missing from her was her engagement ring. And I just sat there, absolutely flummoxed. I couldn't believe the stories I was listening to. And I kept thinking that, why? Why in these circumstances do these people keep choosing the bottle? I mean, surely this is one of those situations where it's harder to stay than it is to leave. And that's when Sukhi spoke up. And he said that the most common misconception of addiction is that it's a choice. And he said that being drunk is the most delightful thing for an addict. It makes them absolutely fearless. You know, real life, it became so bland and bleak, and it almost became unbearable when you're not drunk. And we all know that real life just doesn't offer us the same opportunities as stories do. Right, Krishnamurti? Right, I said. I was so lost in his words that I didn't even notice that he had stolen mine. And I looked back at him. He's staring right at me. In fact, they were all staring at me. Because it was my turn to speak. Now, normally, any time that I'm sitting in a circle listening to other people's stories, I can't wait to tell my own. And tonight was so different, you know. I mean, I had so much to say because these people, they had opened up their deepest, darkest wounds just so that I could heal from mine. They had just relived their most painful memories because they knew better than me that we always repeat the things that we don't repair. They knew better than me that grief needs no reason, fear does not listen to logic, and trauma doesn't give a fuck about how much time has passed. Drinking, it may have made them fearless, but healing made them brave. And they were trying every single day just to do a little bit better than they did yesterday. And that was more than I could say for myself. But I didn't. I couldn't say any of it. I was absolutely paralyzed. I couldn't move. And as I looked back at Sukhi, I realized that they were not the ones who deserved to feel ashamed of themselves. It was me. Because before tonight, every time I heard the word addict, I tuned out for the rest of the story. Before tonight, every time I heard the word addict, I did not know that tolerance was just a very cheap form of respect. So he was still staring at me, waiting for me to speak. But I didn't. But as I looked at his eyes, I finally understood that flash of pride that I had seen when he said, "I'll always be an alcoholic, my dear." Because maybe for me, that's where the story ended. But for him, that's where his story starts. Sharing in a meeting is a choice, and my silence, or paralysis rather, told them that I had made mine. So the meeting was called to a close, with me not having much more to say. And as we went down and walked towards the parking lot, they all came and swarmed around me, the actual addicts. And they all said, anytime you want, anytime you feel like having a drink, you call us. Not so that we can join you, but so that we can stop you. Call me anytime, babe, Diamond said. You know I'll be awake at 4 a.m. Call me anytime, I don't care. And I just looked back at her and all of them, and I felt like an absolute fraud. I mean, here I was, surrounded by more love and support than I'd ever been in my entire life. That too by strangers, and it was all based on a lie. I was standing there, I looked at Sukhi, and he just came and he grabbed my arm like that. And he was like, no, guys, it's okay, it doesn't matter. She's not actually an alkie. She's just here to see what goes down. Why would he do that to me? I looked at him, why would he rat me out? Especially when he was the one who told me to tell the lie. The world froze. And I looked back at all of them, filled with absolute dread. But they just looked at me and said, okay. And they all just walked back to their cars and left. And that's when I realized that this evening had nothing to do with me. They didn't do this for me. They did this for them. They came back here every week because they knew that you cannot heal in the same place that you got sick. As we watched them drive away, Sukhi and I got into our own car. We sat there, not saying one word. Sukhi, the alcoholic who talked too much, was quiet for the first time tonight. And in fact, he didn't even say anything when I got out of the car until I walked to my front door, when he finally honked and said, "Krishnamurti, hope I see you on stage one day." The people, characters, and incidents that have been portrayed in this story are all based on true events, but their identities have been altered to protect them. Because that is in fact what we all need to do, protect each other. My name is Eisha, and I am not an alcoholic. But I am very, very sorry for any time that I failed to protect you.